Chapter 23 of Bunyip Land. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Hartley. Bunyip Land by George Manville Fenn. Chapter 23. We Await Our Fate. I glanced from the blacks to the doctor to see that he was intently gazing up the gorge where the rushing water came seething down, and I read in his face that he could not see the slightest hope. I looked at Jack Penny, who was deeply intent on a little blue anchor that some bush shepherd had tattooed on his thin white arm. Then I turned to Jimmy, whose quick dark eyes were busy inspecting his toes, on the right foot having hold of his war club, which he was holding out for Jip to smell. He alone of the party did not seem to realise the fact that the end was so near. "Can we do anything, Doctor?" I said at last in a low, awe-stricken voice. He gazed at me tenderly and held out his hand, pressed mine when I laid it in his grasp. "No, my lad," he said, "nothing. I've tried mentally to see a way out of our peril, but I can see none. Unless the water sinks, we are lost. Joe, my lad, you must act like a man." "I'll try, Doctor," I said in a choking voice, and, as I spoke, once more there seemed to rise up before me our quiet, peaceful home near Sydney, with its verandah and flowers and the simply furnished pretty rooms, in one of which sat my mother, waiting for tidings of her husband and son. I could not help it, but I clasped my hands together, uttering a despairing cry, for it seemed so hard to give up hope when so young and full of health and strength. Even if it had been in the midst of the roar and turmoil of the storm, it would not have seemed so bad, or when the great flood wave came down. But now, in these calm, cool moments, when there was nothing to excite, nothing to stir the blood, and, above all, just when the sky was a dazzling blue, with a few silvery clouds floating away in the rear of the storm, while the sun shone down gloriously, it seemed too hard to bear. I gazed eagerly at the water to see it was nearly a foot higher, and then I joined the doctor in searching the rock with my eyes for a place that we might find a foothold and clamber beyond the reach of the rushing torrent. But no, there seemed to be no spot where even a bird could climb, and in despair I too began to strip off some of my clothes. "Are you going to try to swim?" said the doctor gravely. I nodded. "That's right," he said. "I shall do the same. We might reach some ledge lower down." He said that word "might" with a slow and solemn emphasis that made me shudder, for I knew he felt that it was hopeless. But all the same, he granted that it was our duty to try. The doctor now bent down over the water, and I could see that it was rising faster than ever. All at once Jimmy seemed to rouse himself, throwing up his waddy with his foot and catching it in his hand. "No water go down," he said. Mass Joe, doctor, and all get up higher. No get wet. Top along, get drown, die, and Bunyip pull 'em down and eat 'em." "I'm afraid escape is impossible, Jimmy," I said sadly. No, what say," cried the black impatiently. "Can't get away," I said. "No get away. Wait 'em, Jimmy, see." He went to the edge of the shelf and dipped one foot in the water, then the other, working his toes about, and then, after a contemptuous look at the blacks, who were calmly awaiting their fate, he looked up at the face of the rock beyond, curving over a abutment, and, reaching up as high as he could, began to climb. It did not seem to occur to him at first that if he were able to escape, no one else would be. And he tried twice, with a wonderful display of activity, which resulted merely in his slipping back. Then he tried elsewhere in 2 places, but with the same result, and after a few more trials he came to me and stood rubbing the back of his head, as if puzzled at being so helpless and beaten at every turn. "Get too much water, Mass Joe," he said. "What am going to do?" I shook my head sadly, and we went to the doctor, who was watching the progress of the rushing river as it rose inch by inch. Cracks and points of rock that we had before noticed disappearing entirely, till the flowing earth-stained surface was but a few inches below the ledge where we were grouped, waiting for the time when we should be swept away. In spite of the knowledge that at most in an hour the ledge would be covered, I could not help watching the rushing stream as it dashed along. It was plain enough to me now why the sides of the gorge were so smooth and regular, for the action of the water must have been going on like this for many ages after every storm, and, laden as the waters were with masses of wood and stone, pebbles and sand, the scouring of the rocks must have been incessant. Then my thoughts came back to our horrible position, and I looked around in despair, but only to be ashamed out of any frantic display of grief by the stoical calmness with which all seemed to be preparing to meet their fate. Still the water rose steadily, higher and higher, inch by inch, and I could see that in a few minutes it would be over the ledge. I was noting, too, that now it was so near the end, my companions seemed averse to speaking to me or each other, but were evidently moody and thoughtful. All but Jimmy, who seemed to be getting excited, and yet not much alarmed. I had gone to the extreme edge of the ledge, where the water nearly lapped my feet, and gazing straight up the gorge at the sunlit waters, kept backing slowly up the slope, driven away as the river rose, when the black came to me and touched my shoulder. "Poor black fellow there going to die, Mass Joe. Not die yet, while Jimmy not go die till funum fader. Lot of time, Jimmy not ready to die, lot of time." "But how are we to get away, Jimmy? How are we to escape?" "Black fellow have big think," he replied. "Much big think, and find way. Great tupid go die. And quite well, thank you, Mass Joe. Jimmy black fellow won't die yet. Mass Joe have big swim. Long o Jimmy. Swim much fuss. All down the water. Won't die. Oh no, oh no." There was so much hope and confidence in the black's manner and his broken English that I felt my heart give a great throb, but the sight of the calm resignation of my companions dampened me again, till Jimmy once more spoke. "Mass Joe take off closum. Put long gun up in corner. Come and fetch 'em when no water. Big swim." Many had been the times when Jimmy and I had dashed into the river and swum about by the hour together. Why not then now try to save our lives in spite of the roughness of the torrent and the horrors of the great fall? I knew, too, that the fall must be at least 2 to 3 miles away, and there was always the possibility of getting into some eddy and struggling out. My spirits rose then at these thoughts, and I rapidly threw off part of my clothes, placing my gun and hatchet with the big knife all tied together in a niche of the rock, where their weight and the shelter might save them from being washed away. As I did this,